Welcome back to the channel. My name is Austin Shadle. Today I hope to help answer the question of should I choose engineering as a major? A little background on myself. I graduated from Iowa State University in spring of 2019 with a degree in mechanical engineering, and throughout my college career I also had 4 engineering internships. So I hope by sharing some of my experience I can help you decide if engineering is the correct path for you. So I'll start off by explaining how I knew that engineering was the route I wanted to take. For me personally, it was pretty easy to figure out that engineering was the route for me. Math and science classes were my personal favorites, and along with that, my school picked up some Project Lead the Way courses. These are some national entry-level engineering courses designed for high school students. Took all 4 years of that. Really helped me realize that I did like engineering. I liked problem solving, applying math and science. I just found I had a passion for problem solving in general. Now, when asking yourself if you should choose engineering as a major, here are a few key things that you should consider. Number one, which should be fairly obvious, you should be pretty strong when it comes to math and science. Now, I'm not saying you have to be one of those geniuses, top of your class, but you do have to be comfortable with math and science, or at least comfortable with pushing yourself to learn the subjects. Something I forgot to mention about being strong in math and science is actually understanding the concepts. That's going to be really big in succeeding in engineering. Yes, a lot of people can do well in math and science by simply memorizing how to solve typical problems, just memorizing definitions and whatnot. But once you start to get into that higher level stuff in engineering, that's not going to be enough, and I would also argue you're just not going to be a very good engineer. So something to ask yourself is, are you able to actually understand the concepts and why you're doing the math that you're doing, or why this principle applies to this, rather than just memorizing what you need to know for the test. You must have an enthusiasm for problem solving, as at its core, engineering is applying math and physics to solve problems. So the next one is very important, and that is having a good work ethic. College is much bigger than high school. There's a lot more that is on you to organize, choose when and how you do things. The teachers are basically just going to throw stuff at you. They're not going to give you as specific a guidance as there is in high school. There's going to be a lot more temptation. Just overall, a lot more things to consider, and it's going to take a strong work ethic to maintain solid performance and do well overall. And the last trait that I'm going to talk about that I think you should have if you want to go into engineering is just the general ability to pick up and use new computer programs. Throughout engineering school, you're going to have a lot of different programs thrown at you, and the teachers are not going to take the time to explain how the program works, so it's going to be on you to learn its interface and all of its features. So you'll know if you have this trait if you can open up a new program and at least have a good idea of where to start clicking for things, and can generally figure out how to do stuff on your own. I'm not saying you have to be able to instantly pick up and master a program, but just being able to open up a new program and not staring at it like a deer in headlights is a good indication that you'll be able to pick up new computer programs. So let's look ahead and see what you can actually expect to experience in engineering school. The first topic that I want to stress a lot is that you are going to have to take on some very high level math. Typically for engineering you'll go through Calc 1, 2, and 3, and I believe most you do differential equations as well. Even if you do well in math in high school, there's a very big gap between those classes that you'll take in high school and calculus in college. I heard a number of instances where people took calculus in high school and they said when they got to college it was a whole different ball game. Sometimes that wasn't true, but regardless, the gap between algebra and calculus is quite large. The concepts that you'll learn are much more abstract and take a lot more thought to figure out, and it will be the core of those later classes in the major. So this is very important that you are capable of understanding more abstract mathematical concepts. And once again, I want to say that is scary, but if you did well in high school and you're willing to work at it, it is within your ability most likely. Now the next one is a bit of a reality check, and something that I disagree is a good way to go about it, but that's just how it is. And that is, you will be spending a lot of time number crunching. And by that, I mean literally just pen to paper, crunching numbers for hours on end. And I personally, this is a subject that I don't think engineering school does well. I think they need to spend a lot less time making you just simply sit there and handwrite every little bit of a calculation. It is important to understand those parts, and there is its place in doing that, but I think time would be much better spent applying those principles, doing more hands-on work. But I digress. That just is a simple reality, at least when I went to school, is you will spend a lot of time just crunching numbers. So the next one kind of continues along with math and crunching numbers, and that is, this is going to be a very deep application of physics involved in engineering. To effectively use physics in problem solving, you need to have a very good understanding of it to a very detailed level. In mechanical engineering, for example, you'll find the thermal efficiency of a very specific component of an entire power plant system. You'll be starting from one end and working to the other just to get one little number. So it is a very deep application of the topics. So again, it's not something that's impossible to do, but you're going to really have to have the passion for it to get to that level. The next topic is definitely the biggest change you will see from high school to college, especially in engineering, and that is there are going to be very fast-paced lectures, and they're going to have a lot of people in them, especially those first couple of years before people drop out to a different major. There's going to be hundreds of people in your class, and the professor is going to go very fast. So like I mentioned before, you're going to be working with very high-level math and very deep application of physics, and when a professor is just flying through the lecture, it's very difficult to keep up. And another thing that I just think is a problem with the way the system is set up, but one thing that did become more popular towards my end of school was that professors were learning to and taking better advantage of filming their lectures and uploading them. This, I think, should just be the default. I think even that engineering should have a flipped classroom like most other majors, where your time with the professor in class is for getting help with solving the problems, and part of your homework should be watching the lecture, because then with the lecture recorded you can slow down, you can pause, you can rewatch. So I do think that is going to become much more normal looking ahead. For me, unfortunately, that was only becoming more popular towards the end of my career. But as somebody that's younger, if you're thinking about engineering school, I do think that will be more common practice by the time you are there. And continuing that realization of lectures going very fast and having a lot more people in class, there is a lot of instances of you having to teach yourself. Like I said before, picking up new computer programs, and if the professor does go too fast or it's hard to understand them, which is also common, you're going to have to make up that difference, go back to the book, look up videos, teach yourself some of these concepts. So that is going to have to be something you can't be afraid to do if you're considering going into engineering. Now, the next one is another interesting part of the system that somewhat has its place and sometimes I think is very overdone, and that is you can definitely expect to have some Weedout classes with engineering. And if you don't know, a Weedout class is a class that they make kind of unnecessarily difficult, and they do that to weed out the people that might not have the work ethic or the ability to understand high-level math and physics concepts. And with that being a bit of a scare tactic, one thing that happens that is actually my next point is they'll have very unreasonable tests. The first test I ever took in college was really just my intro to engineering class, and I got a 50% on that test. Now, I wasn't valedictorian or anything in high school, but I generally had A's in math and science classes, and a good GPA overall, So getting a 50% on my first test, and not for lack of effort, was a real hit to me. But the thing you have to realize is everybody is going to be getting a 50%. The class average, I think, on that test was actually a 40%. So I did better than the average person, but I didn't know that at first. And they really have a tendency to do that in engineering school, especially with Calc 1, Physics 1. They make the tests very hard. The averages on the tests are going to actually be what's below what you'd normally consider failing, and obviously they can't actually fail you or else nobody would ever pass. So ultimately there's a huge curve, and a lot of people will get scared off, but the people generally that stick with it and can, maintain that area around the class average will still pass and move on. So in some ways I think it is good, because engineering is a very difficult major, and the sooner people can see that they're not cut out for it, the better, so they can switch courses and not waste any time. But it does add a lot of stress and confusion to those that do choose to push on and want to stay in engineering. Now, if you're not familiar with how college courses are set up, each course has a number of credit hours applied to it. You have to have a certain number of credit hours to be considered full-time, and then there's also a cap to a max you can have. And I believe it's supposed to somehow represent the amount of time it should take you to succeed or complete the work in that class each week. And especially in engineering, you will find that really isn't that accurate all the time. Oftentimes you'll have maybe a 4 credit hour class that it'll have a lot of class time throughout the week, but it'll have like almost no homework, and it doesn't feel like much of a load on your semester. But then you might have a 3 credit hour class that has almost the same amount of in-class time, but then you'll find yourself spending 3 hours a day on the homework and studying for that class. So unfortunately, those credit hours, especially in engineering, are not the best indicator of how much time that class will take you every week. So what I would suggest is try to talk to other people, go to websites like Rate My Professor, and try to get an idea of what the workload actually is for a class when you're choosing your next semester's courses. The next topic was a bit of a disappointment for me, and that's the reality that in your typical engineering ladder of courses, there's very minimal hands-on work. You will do lab work for quite a few classes, but it's something new every time. It always seemed to be a bit of a mess, and it wasn't actually that satisfying of hands-on work. You do a couple of design-based courses typically in engineering majors, but again, greatly outweighed by the just simply number crunching, focusing on hypothetical stuff classes. So for me, like I said, that was a bit of a disappointment. I do enjoy the hands-on part, and I would once again argue that that should be something that's integrated more into the college system. But where you can find hands-on work that is related to your major is through things like engineering clubs. In my video talking about what you should do in your first couple years of school, I promote finding a club, and I'll just mention that here. Finding an engineering club that gives you some of that hands-on, real-life experience is very valuable and something you should definitely check out and make time for. The last subject I want to talk about that will come up in engineering school is coding. For me, I was able to skate through my classes without having to really understand coding much, but as I went through my 4 years, it became more and more prominent, and I do believe in general in all engineering and a lot of industries, coding is going to be almost as important as just understanding math. So that's definitely something, if you're considering engineering, that you have to be at least willing to try to learn. For me, I never really dug into it because my first class that had coding, the professor was terrible at teaching it. I was already stressed by a bunch of other stuff, so it really just had a bad taste in my mouth from the get-go when it came to coding. And luckily, I was able to scoot through the other classes without having to really learn it. But I do foresee in the future that that is not something you'll be able to skip and still succeed. So, just through my experience, I would expect coding to be a much more prominent thing in your classes. Another big thing in engineering school is what you do with your summers in between, and ideally, you want to have that filled with an internship. So, an internship is when you basically go to a company and more or less work as an engineer for them for the summer. Now, these can really be a big factor in setting yourself apart from somebody else that's applying to the same job as you are when you're done with school. Personally, I think it is one of the biggest things to focus on. Unless you're one of those people with a near perfect GPA, this is really what's going to set you apart. But I will say, I guess, if you are more the academic side and say research is something that you're really into, have the opportunity to do something research related over the summer, that is also another really good option. For me personally, I just have more experience with internships. Now, for getting internships, unfortunately, they can be quite hard to acquire. Getting one after your first year of school is very unlikely. So there are really just two things you can do. One is have a stellar GPA. I had a buddy that I'm pretty sure just simply because he had near 4.0, talked to like 5 companies at the career fair, got like 4 interviews and 3 offers within 2 weeks. And then there was me, I had a good GPA, just nowhere near a 4.0, and I would spend 6 hours at the career fair, talk to 20 companies, would maybe get 2 interviews, and even then, no offers. So, unless you have that really good GPA, you're going to have to put in the legwork. There's lots of opportunities out there, and one thing that you're going to want to do is really expand your options. Try not to just stay in your hometown or state. If you can at all manage it, open up that opportunity to other places, and just really put in the legwork. Like I said, apply, follow up, talk to companies in person if you ever get a chance. For me, my first internship, I was fortunate enough to get after my first year through a connection with my uncle. Wynn worked with the company he worked for the summer. I took my decent GPA, used that momentum, and just applied a lot, and that's how I ended up getting my other 3 internships. Now, to get a little more specific with GPA and applying for internships, a lot of the bigger companies and even some smaller ones will often not even consider your resume unless you have at least a 3.0, or in places like Google, a 3.2. And this is something that definitely bugs me because I do not in any way believe that a good GPA will mean you're a good engineer. It is harder to get by, but some people can still get through those difficult classes, mostly just memorizing concepts and how to solve specific problems. And ultimately, that really isn't what makes you a good engineer. What makes you a good engineer is understanding the concepts, how to apply them in different situations. But that's just how it is. It makes sense in one way that, you're just in school, you don't have a resume that somebody at the end of school or an experienced engineer would have, so sometimes all they have to go off of to kind of judge maybe your work ethic is your GPA. Another big reason to take an internship is the pay. So maybe your typical summer job will pay you $9-10 an hour. You might even be stuck working part-time, or maybe it pays a little more if you're doing a more labor-intensive job. But typically, engineering internships, unlike a lot of other majors, do pay fairly well relative to that. As well, I think they should, because you will be basically doing a full paid engineer's job. In my experience, my first internship was my least paid, and that was $15 an hour. The next one, I believe I made $16 or $17 an hour, but they also got me an apartment for the summer. The one after that, no apartment, but was $20 an hour. And then the one after that was a more extreme one. I think it was maybe $17 an hour, apartment covered, and then some other expenses. And then I ended up actually working 70 plus hours a week, so made a lot of overtime. But regardless, it will pay better than most summer jobs will, and I'm sure most people need that money, especially in college, as school is quite expensive. And it'll also give you some opportunity to save up and hopefully maybe not have to work so much during the semester and focus more on your studies. All in all, I think it's just only positives when it comes to that. Now, I mentioned before trying not to limit yourself, and I would encourage you, say you've applied to a lot of companies or a lot of jobs you really wanted, but maybe you only have an offer on the table for one that isn't that appealing. Maybe it's in a small town. I found myself in small towns a few times that you don't want to live in. I would still encourage you to take that offer. Even if it's not that enjoyable, it will pay more, and regardless, you should be able to get some good real world experience, and then you can take that into your next interview and really set yourself apart. So I really encourage you, especially if you're earlier in your collegiate career, if you do have an offer, regardless of what it is, I would take it. I think the positives will always outweigh the negatives in that case. And then the last one, and might actually be the most important, especially was for me, this will help you find your path. Now, mechanical engineering especially can apply to a lot of different fields. In high school, in some of those engineering courses, we did a decent bit of design work. I really liked that, and I just kind of figured I'd end up going into design engineering. My first internship was exactly that. And I quickly found that sitting and doing modeling 40 hours a week, every week, was not the route I wanted to go. So, fortunately for me, I learned that right at the beginning of my collegiate career and could focus on other things. My next internship was in manufacturing. I found I liked that a bit more. The one after that was kind of a mix of manufacturing and design. I discovered I really liked that. And then unfortunate circumstances and very strange difficulty finding yet another internship, I ended up doing construction management. I found that I like that as even more, and that just happens to be what I am in today. So getting that real world experience is very valuable when it comes to deciding how you actually want to direct your career. And what kind of engineering you want to do. Certain engineering degrees specialize in things, like chemical. For engineering, it's more thermal and fluids. Construction, obviously, construction. But you can still make your way into a lot of different industries regardless, and having internships and real life experience in that industry will help you realize very quickly if that's not the route you want to take. And finally, for choosing engineering as a major, what can you expect for career opportunities once you're done with school? As I mentioned before, a lot of the skills you will pick up will apply to a lot of different fields. Like I said, mechanical engineering, I could have gone to design work, manufacturing, but eventually I found myself in construction management, kind of just going in a totally different direction. So that is one good thing about engineering, is you will not be as restricted when it comes to career paths. If you pick something such as aerospace, maybe, I hear that is a much more narrower outlook as far as career opportunities and often a lot more competitive. But for most other types of engineering, you can take it and go in a lot of different directions. Another good thing about picking engineering is in some fields, such as maybe manufacturing or construction, it can be a fast track to management. Not to say it's going to fast track you to, really high level management that makes a lot of money, but management nonetheless. So that'll happen in fields such as construction, where maybe a lot of people, work their way from the bottom without schooling. If you do go get that engineering degree, you can fast track to those entry level management positions. Another positive for career opportunities in engineering is you will get good starting pay. As far as being straight out of college, engineering is one of the better paying majors. For example, compared to a friend of mine in journalism, my salary is literally double of his. Now, a caveat to good starting pay, um, typical engineering jobs do have a bit of a cap. If you really want to make some serious money, you're going to have to work your way into those upper level management, project management kind of jobs. But like I said, engineering is a very good starting point in working your way up to that. So, something to consider if all you ever want to do is just design work, you're likely not to make really big money, but certainly make a comfortable living. So, as I've said before, there's just a lot of opportunity and a wide variety of things you can do with engineering. You can do design work, and that alone can apply to a million different things. You can get your way into management, manufacturing, testing, working on materials, or you could even, if you really go for it, you're really smart, be on that Tesla, SpaceX, next level, cutting edge technology being developed. So that's just one thing I really liked about engineering that appealed to me, is there's just a lot of different ways you can go, and as long as you use your time wisely in school, you can figure out what it is exactly you want to do. I hope you liked the video, and I hope that I helped you decide whether or not engineering is the major for you. It is a very difficult major, but I encourage you to strongly consider it, as it is very rewarding. It'll set you up well for your future, and if you're into math and science, can be enjoyable. Unless you're one of those just total geniuses that just breeze through everything math and science related, it will take a lot of work. But another thing that I want to mention, that I mentioned in my other video, is to not be afraid to get a tutor. That becomes much more common in college, especially in engineering. It can be a big hit to your ego, but it really is normal to get a tutor, especially for those more difficult classes. And there's a lot of opportunities to get help and make sure that you're not really on your own learning those concepts. So just something to think about. And as always, if you're struggling to reach your goals in school or out of school, go check out my website, shadyengineering.com. I have more information, tips, and tricks on chasing your goals there, as well as some services I provide. Please go check those out. I would love to help you reach your goals. And as always, if you like the video, please like and subscribe.